Today marks a pivotal moment in my life as I stand in the family home, a place brimming with cherished memories. The walls seem alive, whispering stories of the past. My cat, Roy, is here too, darting about with uncontainable energy, his joy lighting up the room and lifting my spirits. This house, the cornerstone of my family's legacy, is more than just a home. It's where my father poured his heart into building a life for us, transforming it into an impressive estate now valued at $6 million. It stands as a monument to his hard work and vision, a legacy he entrusted to me after his passing. In his absence, however, challenges have surfaced. My husband believes the inheritance should be shared between us, a perspective that contrasts sharply with the legal documents affirming my sole ownership. My name is Marilyn, I'm 40 years old, and I navigate the modern financial world through my career at an online bank, a path shaped by my parents' unwavering lessons on money management and responsibility. Although I grew up in a wealthy household, my upbringing was far from extravagant. My parents ensured I led a grounded life, giving me a modest allowance, serving simple meals, and enrolling me in public school. Despite this, whispers of our wealth spread, painting a picture of privilege that didn't match my reality. Marilyn, life must be so easy for you in that grand house. Do you have all the latest gadgets? Can we come over and play? Classmates often asked, convinced my life was a whirlwind of luxury and indulgence. In truth, I didn't have the latest toys or gaming systems, but those assumptions persisted, attracting friendships built more on perceived privilege than genuine connection. Now, standing in this house filled with echoes of my past, I am reminded of where true richness lies, not in material wealth, but in the values and memories that have shaped me. Growing up, I often found myself in uncomfortable situations where friends or acquaintances would ask for money, a request that clashed with my parents' teachings of self-reliance and discretion. One of the most difficult moments was when I accidentally broke Emma's gaming console. At the time, I had no money to replace it, which only deepened the guilt I felt. Around this time, Barbara, a new classmate, entered my life. She asked if I had told my parents about the console, but I was too afraid of their disappointment to confess. I can't tell them, they might get upset, I admitted, hoping she'd understand. But when Barbara later asked me for financial help, I had to refuse, bound by my parents' strict rule against lending money. Apologizing to Barbara was awkward and strained our budding friendship. Things escalated when she reacted tearfully to my refusal, and soon rumors spread that I was unwilling to help a friend despite my family's wealth. My attempts to explain that I didn't have extra money fell on deaf ears, leaving me caught in a web of misunderstandings and assumptions. Reflecting on those moments now, I see how deeply they shaped my views on wealth, relationships, and integrity, lessons that resonate as I navigate the complexities of my life today. Emma's words stung deeply, insinuating that I valued money more than friendship. The situation only worsened when she and Barbara began spreading false rumors that I owed them money and was refusing to compensate for the broken console. Eventually, the school intervened, uncovering the truth and reprimanding Emma and Barbara. Yet the rumors didn't stop, they continued to spread like wildfire, eventually reaching my parents. My father took charge, arranging a meeting with both families. Despite their apologies, the damage was done, and our relationship was beyond repair. I made the difficult decision to distance myself from Emma and Barbara, but even after that, I couldn't escape their cold stares and whispered remarks. It was a painful lesson in how money could complicate friendships, eroding trust in ways I hadn't expected. That evening at dinner, my father offered advice that would stick with me for years. He told me that it was perfectly okay to say no, especially when it came to financial matters. Marilyn, you don't have to explain yourself. It's fine to say no, he said, his tone both gentle and firm. He also shared a practical tip for handling persistent requests for money. If they keep asking, just tell them you need to check with your parents, even if you know you can't lend it. This wisdom became foundational for me, shaping my approach to money and relationships. As I grew older, I became more discerning about who I let into my life, placing character above any financial considerations. After university, I made it a point to keep my personal and professional lives separate to avoid any entanglements. These lessons on boundaries, both financial and emotional, shaped me into the person I am today. By the time I was 32, I met Scott through a mutual friend. Despite the age gap between us, his authenticity and warmth were undeniable, and what began as casual dating quickly deepened into something serious. 3 years later, we celebrated our love with a beautiful wedding, much to my parents' joy. A month into our marriage, my father suggested inviting Scott over to our home. Though I had reservations, Scott could be quite talkative, and I worried he might accidentally reveal too much about our family's financial matters. I felt it was time to introduce him more fully into our world. When Scott visited, he was visibly impressed by our home. He admitted that he hadn't realized the extent of our family's wealth. While the visit itself was smooth, Scott's barrage of questions about our finances on the drive home made me uneasy. I wasn't fully familiar with the details myself, and his curiosity seemed to probe into areas I wasn't prepared to discuss. A few months later, life took a sharp turn when my mother called to inform me that my father had been hospitalized. It was a shock, adding another layer of complexity to our already challenging circumstances. It was a shock to learn that my dad was unwell, especially since I hadn't noticed any signs of illness. Reflecting on our last meeting, I vaguely remembered that he seemed a bit off, but I never imagined it could be something so serious. Guilt and worry washed over me as I thought about it. When my mom and I visited him in the hospital that Saturday, my dad tried to stay positive, but it was clear he was struggling. Despite his efforts to reassure us, he apologized for what he thought was a burden on us, a typical response from him, always putting others before himself. The doctor's diagnosis hit us like a ton of bricks. My dad had advanced pancreatic cancer, and it had already spread too far for surgery. It was almost impossible to comprehend that someone as health-conscious and energetic as my dad could be struck by something so devastating. Throughout the process, though, he remained remarkably strong. He focused on keeping us happy, even while silently enduring his own suffering. Watching him, trying to protect us from his pain, brought tears to our eyes. Hospital regulations limited visitors to immediate family, and it saddened him that he couldn't have more people around to create happy memories. His desire to continue living life to the fullest, even in the face. A few months later, my father passed away after a fierce battle with his illness. In the wake of his death, conversations about the inheritance began to emerge. I inherited a mansion valued at $6 million, and Scott's curiosity about it only intensified. Despite my efforts to keep him out of these discussions, his excitement about potentially moving into the mansion and his relentless questions about the financial details caught me off guard. I later learned that Scott had spoken to my cousin at the funeral, who had casually mentioned that it would be a shame for such a grand house to remain empty. This remark only made matters worse. Despite my attempts to make it clear that the inheritance was mine alone and not something to be shared, Scott seemed unwilling to accept this. Our relationship grew increasingly strained as he pushed for more involvement in the family estate. At my father's funeral, Scott was present but distant, offering little support during the memorial services or in the subsequent legal matters. As we tried to return to normal life, I was stunned when he told me he had changed the ownership of our family home into his name. He presented legal documents to prove it. This betrayal was a profound violation of trust and an obvious disregard for the boundaries in our relationship. Dealing with these inheritance issues brought to light deeper problems in our marriage, forcing us to reevaluate the trust and values between us. When Scott suggested that we could continue living together as roommates without much financial contribution from him, and even threatened divorce if I disagreed, I was crushed. The weight of his actions was staggering. I pleaded with him to reconsider, hoping he would realize the emotional turmoil his decisions had caused. But when Scott revealed he had consulted a lawyer and made the unilateral decision to change the ownership of the house, it became clear that our issues had escalated beyond repair. Divorce no longer felt like a distant possibility, it seemed inevitable. I felt completely betrayed and isolated, forced to distance myself from the life and home I had once shared with Scott. I couldn't understand why he would take such extreme actions. It felt like his attitude toward money had shifted in a way that deeply hurt both our relationship and his integrity. The situation escalated the following day when Scott demanded the house keys, insisting that he now owned the property. When he attempted to enter the house, he was stopped by security, to whom I had provided the proper documents confirming the home was legally mine, a gift from my father. Seeing the proof, Scott was stunned. He had hired a man named Frank to handle the legal transfer of ownership and paid him a staggering $410,000. To Scott's horror, Frank turned out to be a fraud. Frank had vanished, leaving no way for Scott to reach him. As Scott's frustration mounted, he turned his anger on me. He accused me of overspending and questioned my knowledge of inheritance laws, trying to place the blame on me for the mess he was now in. Despite Scott's attempts to salvage our relationship and his hopes of giving our marriage another chance, the trust between us had been shattered beyond repair. I had no choice but to ask the security guard to escort him off the property, marking the end of a chapter that had once been filled with love but was now tainted by betrayal and loss. In the months that followed, I had plenty of time to reflect on everything that had unfolded. This period of introspection allowed me to recognize how essential trust and honesty are in any relationship. The painful ordeal with Scott, filled with lies and betrayal, taught me the importance of never letting financial matters cloud my judgment or compromise my integrity. It was during the first memorial service for my father at our family temple that I unexpectedly saw Scott again. Since our divorce, his life had taken a downward turn. He was unemployed, struggling financially, and visibly worn down by the consequences of his actions. Seeing him there, at such a deeply personal and somber event, reminded me of how far apart our lives had grown since the separation. Scott's presence stirred a mixture of emotions within me. He seemed lost, standing in a place where he clearly didn't belong, surrounded by people who had once been part of his life but now felt like strangers. His attempt to apologize, though heartfelt, only seemed to create an uncomfortable scene with my relatives. As much as I could see his pain, I had to ask him to leave, and security had to step in to ensure it was done quietly. That moment, though difficult, was also a turning point for me. It solidified my resolve to leave the past behind and move forward. I decided it was time to move out of my parents' home, a decision I had been contemplating for some time. I found a new place to live, severing ties with Scott once and for all. Meanwhile, Scott continued to visit the property, which my mom and I had turned into a rental villa. This transformation allowed us to give new life to the family home and share its beauty with others, turning it into a source of joy and peace for guests. Scott, on the other hand, seemed to be making efforts to rebuild his life. He found a new job and appeared focused on starting fresh. Although I had mixed feelings about him, I was glad to see him trying to move forward. The villa, however, became my focus. Turning the family estate into a rental villa not only honored my father's vision but also allowed us to create a warm, inviting space for people to enjoy. Known for its breathtaking views and lush garden, the villa quickly became a popular destination. We hosted a variety of events, from intimate weddings to family gatherings, and each one brought joy to our hearts. Working alongside my mom on this project brought us closer, and the sense of accomplishment was undeniable. As the villa flourished, we decided to make further improvements, adding a swimming pool, a cozy outdoor lounge, and a play area for children. Each addition made the villa even more attractive and enhanced its appeal as a destination for relaxation and celebration. It felt like a new chapter of growth and happiness for both of us. Our commitment to providing exceptional experiences for our guests quickly paid off. The villa became a cherished destination for those seeking a peaceful retreat and memorable events. This venture was about more than just business. It was about fulfilling my father's dream and creating lasting memories for the people who visited. It gave me immense joy and satisfaction to tend to the garden, which had become a symbol of renewal and life. Transforming the family home into a vibrant, welcoming space where people could gather and create memories filled me with pride. It was as though I could feel my father's pride from above, watching as his vision came to life in a way that honored his legacy. This venture not only fulfilled my father's dream but also provided my mom and me with financial stability and a renewed sense of freedom. Through this journey, I learned invaluable lessons about trust,